This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And today's theme is Grow the Zone. And that should be quite interesting because, it's wintertime here in Northeast Ohio and not much is growing. So maybe we're talking about our inner selves, Candace?
Possibly, yeah. It's a really good instinct you have there.
Only been doing this 3 years. I should have some
I know,
instinct.
that's a shock to me. Right. And while I was organizing my thoughts and notes for today, I was holding the mirror up to myself saying, okay, I have to apply some of these things on my own. So it's not like the guru part is that we all have our inner wisdom and our own guru if we can just pay attention to the hidden iceberg of things that drive a lot of how we think, behave, and so on. So we're going to have a conversation about that again today.
Okay.
All right. So last time we talked about, some of the ways we limit ourselves in the year, since it's the theme of the new year, and a lot of people set resolutions or goals, whether they be fitness goals, internal or external. And there's a lot of ways that we sabotage ourselves. So we talked about that a bit last time. And so we're just going to build on that conversation today. And one of the books that I relied on the last time, it was just one of a few, was from Gay Hendricks. And the name of the book is called The Big Leap. And the idea in The Big Leap is that we have a gap between the zone we function in versus what we're capable of, where we would feel fulfilled.
Okay.
And so he talks about these zones, the zone of incompetence. I spent a lot of time there. And these are things we're not good at. Other people could do a better job. So for me, that's anything having to do with technology. So for you, that's not your zone of incompetence. That's your zone of competence. But what might be a zone of incompetence for you?
Wow. I know there's a lot. I'd say conflict resolution.
Interesting. Okay. So just put a little, thumbtack next to that one so you can come back to it. And where would be a zone of competence for you?
Being open to learning.
Okay. All right. And so this is something where others can do things just as well as you can. So
Right.
a lot of times we'll jump in and we'll say, well, it's faster to do it myself, kind of a deal.
Right.
The latter part would be the incompetence. And a zone of excellence is something you do extremely well, and you actually have a sense of self-satisfaction, even if you may still have a little inkling that you're not at your full potential. So where might that be for you?
I think it's at public speaking.
Great. And your zone of genius is any set of activities where you're uniquely suited to do it, and it draws upon your special strengths and gifts. And so where does that show up in your life?
I don't think I can see that far.
So if I were to have you and any listeners draw, like a pizza pie and carve those zones up, the zone of incompetence, the zone of competence, the zone of excellence, and the zone of genius, in any given week, what percentage do you think you spend in each one?
The zone of incompetence, I'm going to say I probably spend a third of my time there.
Okay. And then what about the zone of competence? So these are things others can do as well as you can.
Right. Maybe another third there. And then everything else should be in segments in the last third of that pie, almost equally.
Okay, so excellence and genius would be
right.
shared.
Yep.
Okay, all right. So what occurs to you having articulated that?
My incompetence feeling is taking up too much of my time. And it's something that I know that I need to work on. And I think if I can narrow that down, you know, my area of excellence obviously can start to grow as well. It's almost like getting rid of those negative voices in my head.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, so the whole idea, the common denominator to almost everything we talk about is first noticing. And then, you have that choice, that fork in the road where you can say, okay, I'm going to continue down the path I've always been, or I'm going to look at this from a different perspective. So some of the other things that the last time we talked about our inner thermostat, Martha Beck called it the body compass, where we knew whether we were feeling good on the spectrum or having negative feelings. And the whole idea was to go in the direction of feeling good, even if we're just doing it incrementally, with 0 being in the middle, something neutral, positive 10 at the extreme on one end and negative 10 on the other. And the idea is, even if you could only improve it from a -1 to say a 0 would be an improvement. And then if you could go to +1 and so on. So is there anything in particular where you might have that incremental improvement, just one area of incompetence that you could either say goodbye to or delegate?
Well, it's interesting because somebody who I had on as my guest last week, she's a personal coach who deals with how you see yourself in the mirror and what you want other people to see. Okay. And she does it by, helping you identify, your hairstyle, your makeup, what you're wearing, who is it you want to be at this moment in time. And I enjoyed doing the podcast with her. She contacted me afterwards and she asked if we could do a one-on-one chat, because she was curious, am I coming across the way that I want to be? And I had to think about that. And we came up with the fact that I don't have any particular style when it comes to my outfit, my makeup, things like that. I'm free flow when I wake up in the morning. Do I want to wear black? Do I want to wear pink? Do I want to wear, sequins? And what she got me to understand was that when you put on this outer layer, if it doesn't reflect what's going on with you internally, you can either be very uncomfortable, or you can just be like totally out of step for the day. And I thought about it, and that's been who I've been for a long time. I never thought about, oh yeah, if I wear my favorite sweater today, that makes me feel really good and I'm going to be vibrant. And those are the areas that, I've started looking at, like, why do I want to wear that? Why do I want to say that? I even fixed my chair here in the studio. It has not been comfortable. And yet I've been sitting in this chair for 2 years in discomfort. Okay. And it dawned on me after I had this conversation with her, like, either go out and get a different chair, or how can you make this chair more comfortable? And by fixing the chair, I feel better. Number one, I'm not hurting my back, but I'm comfortable. And I think that is now coming out a little bit better in my podcasting, because I'm not sitting here feeling that ache in the back of my spine.
So 2 things stand out for me. One is that how you are in the outside can impact how you are in the inside, and vice versa.
Right.
And then the other part is you became aware of what you were tolerating.
Yes,
All right. And so, and then you made some changes.
exactly.
All right. So very, very consistent with the theme that we have. And by the way, I always think you're very stylish. So it may not reflect how you want to reflect yourself, but nonetheless, you can't see me on camera for a good reason.
Hey, people, don't believe that. Don't believe that. Okay.
All right. So in terms of that body compass, where would that show up for you? That switch that you made?
So number one, I don't have a nagging ache in trying to figure out, is it really physical or is it emotional? And I really didn't even realize how much it was physical. And ever since the first podcast that we did together, when you asked me, where are you feeling it? Nobody in any kind of therapy, training, or anything else had ever asked me that question. And I now ask myself that all the time, because it helps me identify how important is it for me to either make a change or stay consistent, or like I did this past week, be honest with myself over something and say, okay, this is just not for now. Instead of saying it's not forever, it's just not for now. And I think if all of us can get in touch with what we're actually feeling, I think it makes us a lot smarter.
Yeah, I mean, it's our body's early warning system. You know, we've talked about that book, The Body Keeps the Score, but not just from an illness perspective, but also, you know, we're sending signals to ourselves all the time, consciously or unconsciously, and we tend to be, you know, blind to them
Right.
unless we pay attention.
Yep.
And then, you know, the thing I love about the Martha Beck body compass, or the internal thermostat that the author of The Big Leap talks about, is it gives you a relativity to it. So I'm either going in the direction that is beneficial to me because it feels better, or I'm going in the direction that I'm clearly stuffing things and not dealing with them.
Right.
So kudos to you. So in terms of these zones, one of the things we can be paying attention to is what he calls our upper limit problem, your ULP. And apparently one of the case studies he talks about in the book is a CEO of a large corporation, and they had the conversation about these zones and their limiting beliefs and the upper limit problem, and they coined it their gulp when they would pay attention to it. So it was kind of easier to remember. But some of the ways to see how it shows up, aside from our body compass, is knowing when we're out of integrity with ourselves and with others. So that episode that you described, where it's not a not never, or not ever, it's a not now situation where you just made a decision about something based on your gut. So right. You would have been out of integrity with yourself if you had done it knowing you had something going on that just, it didn't feel right now.
Exactly. And, you know, I've always been a do it now person. Like I said, jump in head first, whether I was ready or not. And I won't say I failed, you know, at what I would do, because I would push myself to achieve at some point. But I realized that I've worn myself out doing that. And I don't get 100% of what I would like to out of whatever it is, whether it's, you know, just simply going out to lunch with somebody, taking a class, taking on a new client, whatever. And when this all came up this week, I sat at my desk for about a half hour, and I actually made myself cry because it hurt so much that I wasn't going to do what I always did. And it was funny because as I'm sitting here and I'm crying, all of a sudden I thought to myself, what am I crying about? Like, it's not the end of the world. And it could be a lot worse if I jumped in head first. And I went from crying and really berating myself to saying, hey, that's okay. I'm human. And I don't think I really say that very often.
How did it feel when you said it?
It was a huge release. It's like, yeah, I have feelings like everybody else. I have limitations like everybody else. My limitations are different. And I get to choose when I use them. And that was the freeing part, because I get to choose. It wasn't up to anybody else. And I just have to say that this team of women who I was going to be working with, I already feel like they're my friends, because they just like, hey, wow, do I get it? And it was like, seriously? It just gave me a whole different viewpoint on myself and other people in the world who looked and said, yeah, get it. And it's like, okay.
Well, and how we can be generous with ourselves, because if I'm hearing what you were saying correctly, you would have jumped in and kind of, not compulsively, not in that, clinical sense, but you would have gone ahead and pushed through even when it was uncomfortable.
Exactly. And just knowing that was not what this was supposed to be about. And I look back at other times in my life when I've done that. And, I may have made it more difficult for the people around me. And that certainly is not what I wanted to do either. So it just gave me a lot of enlightening this week as I worked with other clients. I had a client who called me yesterday and was asking about different options. And I just said, I would love to do all that for you, but this is where my strength is. And this is what I can really do for you. And it wasn't like, again, in my past where I'd say, oh yeah, I can do that. And I would go out and Google it and figure it out and add more stress to my life.
And when you would say, oh yeah, I can do that, it was from a sense of what?
Trying to please. And that's one of my saboteurs.
So the
Number
idea
one.
now that you know it, I'm sure you see it everywhere. Just like now, once you buy a yellow Volkswagen or something,
Yep.
somebody in the family does, you see them everywhere, that
Yep.
reticulation, that pattern recognition.
Yep, exactly. And in the last 24 hours, I've noticed little things that I've done that I've said, no, can't do that because, it's going to affect me negatively. So you know what? Let's move on. And, and again, I know you've said this before, and I hope our listeners understand. It doesn't mean I'm going to be perfect at this, those things are going to creep back in, and tomorrow I could, jump in head first into something that probably isn't the best thing for me, but maybe
At least you'll know it.
Yep, exactly.
Well, and the point is that we become more attuned to that, our body telling us things, our intuition telling us things. And there's a guy I've been coaching for a number of years. And when we started out, I think he had maybe 3 keys on the keyboard of emotions that he felt. And when I would say, where do you feel that in your body? He would give me answers like, well, I think I would feel it in my neck. It's like, he didn't even know how he felt, where it felt it. And now he I think I've mentioned him before, where he's playing the full keyboard, and it's a phrase that he shared with me that I just loved. He's living life like a loose fitting garment, which I just love the concept of, kind of like maybe a big Hawaiian shirt or something,
Yeah.
flip flops, whatever else. But the point is, all he did was incrementally I mean, it wasn't easy necessarily, but it wasn't avoidable. I mean,
Yeah.
it has to be addressed at some point. It is being addressed either favorably or unfavorably in terms of what we're after. So one of the questions we can be asking ourselves in terms of figuring out which zone we're in any given category of activity we may be engaging in is, do I feel a sense of energy or lack of energy? Where am I not telling myself the full truth? All right, so that's when you had your self-confronting half hour there, and
Right.
this is something I don't think I should do right now. And where have we not kept our promises, either to ourselves or to others? And we've talked about this before, our family story about who we are and or how we should be. And then finally, the phrase that I like that came from the author Gay Hendricks from The Big Leap. If it weren't for X, and X is external circumstances, I could be doing Y. All right.
Okay.
So, mine is if I weren't shy and an introvert, I could, be, Y, whatever it happens to be. I could be doing a better job with my podcast for Karen. Those kinds of things. So how would that show up for you?
There's a lot of changes. So if I wasn't so sensitive to hearing the word no, I probably would take more chances, and that doesn't mean jumping in head first, but it's, allowing more stuff to be fed to me. So for instance, this person that I had interviewed last week regarding, identifying your style, when we had this conversation this week and she sent me some information to read through, I understand what she does with her clients. I'm not quite sure I would fit into her client because my style, it sort of changes day to day. Okay. And who I'm going to be conversing with. I don't necessarily dress for the show, but I dress for my comfort level in the show, if that makes any sense. And so, depending on who my guest might be, I might feel that, maybe I should be a little bit more tailored today because of the conversation. Tomorrow it might be, I can just wear my pink sweatshirt and that's fine. Maybe instead of my hair being natural, maybe it should be straight. And so I even asked her and she said, well, we can still identify a style for you. And I said, okay, I'm open to listening. But in the past, I probably would have put my back up and I've been like, no, my mother used to tell me what to wear all the time. You're not going to tell me what to wear. And I even said that to her and she laughed and she said, I get it. She said, you're absolutely right. I'm not going to tell you what to wear, but we're going to look at, who is that person that you want people to see, whether you're wearing your pink sweatshirt or you're wearing, a blazer, and a blouse.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, okay. It started to come together for me. Whereas, as many of you know, doing recordings on Zoom and audio, sometimes we don't always think about, what our outer appearance looks like. It's not the same as being in a room and having a conversation with somebody.
Definitely, definitely. And, I don't know how many Zoom calls you've been on, maybe not in this context, but, I have to attend a lot of meetings, and sometimes people are, literally in bed. It's
Yeah.
like, is that the image you want to portray?
Yeah, exactly.
So the outer part is an expression of,
Right.
how you want to present yourself to the world and to yourself, right?
Right.
So in the context of these upper limit problems that keep us from our higher zone levels, some of the tip-offs are when we're worrying, when we're blaming, especially the kind of blame that kind of is hair trigger, like that driver cut me off. I always have that driver thing going on, even though I
Right.
don't do as much driving. Hiding our significant feelings, so not playing that whole keyboard like that colleague that I have that I was coaching. Not keeping agreements and being out of integrity in essence, and then not speaking those significant truths to yourself. Or here's one, brushing off compliments. So do you ever do that?
Oh, all the time. And my husband hates it, but I do it with him all the time.
So that can be not only a saboteur, but it can also be an upper limit problem. They're in the same neighborhood. And then some of the stories we tell ourselves, being too old, too fat, too poor, too rich, too, whatever, and too busy. That was my mantra for so long. And my sister said to me one time, "You always say that." And of course it was, my reality. And I said, well, because it's true. And of course, later I was able to discover that I was tolerating a lot of things. That's why I was too busy. And it wasn't like it was written in stone or something like that. So is there any particular zone that you would like to step from into another one? And I'm not saying go from incompetence to genius.
Right.
Is there anything in particular?
I'd like to shrink my incompetence thoughts. And again, I saw this coming out yesterday when I was talking to this client. I kept thinking, if I don't give them 100% what they're asking for, I'm going to lose them. And then if I lose them, it would not only make me feel sad, but it would add to my incompetence. And those thoughts were running through my mind, but I also knew that I had to be honest with myself that if I provided, it's only like 5% of what she was asking for, okay? But I knew that 5% could take me more than 100% of my time. And I didn't think I was going to be fair to her. And so I had to break through that and say what I did, that, this is where I'm strongest. If you'd like me to look at this other area, I will, but I'm not sure it's something that I can provide for you. And then to hear her say, oh, that's no problem. It was like, I wonder how I could have done this in the past and saved myself, so much stress.
Just putting some boundaries on it.
Right.
Let me ask you this question. So you asked yourself it, or said to yourself, it wouldn't be fair to her. Would it have been fair to you?
Oh, no, it wasn't going to be fair to either one of us.
But did that occur to you?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
But again, as that people pleaser, I kept thinking I have to please her. And, I've been reading all these articles lately that talk about, people pleasing. And wow, I don't know how I got so ingrained into it. But as I've been reading these articles, it explains some of the headaches and aches and pains that I have felt that have been chronic. And doctors would say to me, don't know where it's coming from. Well, it sort of makes sense where it's coming from. It's coming from the stress I'm putting on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And, now starting to recognize it, change my seat up, and now my seat feels better and my back doesn't hurt. Like, I sat here for 3 years in pain and didn't 100% connect it. Okay. And I remember probably a year into having this chair, I mentioned it to my husband. He said, then go get another chair. And it was like, no, we spent a lot of money on this chair. I'll make it work. But it was like, it's not that I couldn't afford to go get a new chair. But, I'm just going to make it work. And those are some of the things I've done my whole life. And it's freeing to know that, you don't have to do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and the phrase that worked for me was the tolerating, because I think I told that story about I came home from work one day and I said to my husband, I know what habit I'm gonna practice this quarter. And he said, oh, great, dear, great. And I said, I'm gonna practice intolerance. And he said, oh, wonderful, dear, wonderful. And then I knew he hadn't heard me. And I said, no, I said intolerance, because it was clear he thought I said tolerance, because I can be a little impatient. And but it was it was one of the best things I could have done for myself. It's not like I was saying no, aggressively to people, but I was just aware of all the times I said yes.
Yeah.
And in this book, The Upper Limit Problem, or The Big Leap, where he talks about the upper limit problem, where we say yes can be an inadvertent no to other things, because we're clouding our schedule up with commitments and things we may not feel good about.
Exactly. And it's funny because yesterday, when I told my husband how I got this all resolved, I said, so, I think I'm at my limit of taking on clients right now. And he goes, well, why do you say that? And so I showed him my calendar. He said, I want you to look at it because there are other places that you can adjust. And I didn't see it. Okay. But I was glad that he had seen it. He didn't tell me where. He said, and when I looked at the calendar, it was like, God, you're right. Like, I don't have to do 10 independent shows a week. It was like, there is room, there is still room for growth. But when I was saying it initially, it was like, hey, now my schedule is really, really full. And when I mentioned it to him, he said, do what makes you happy. He said, but don't always see yourself as being limited. And it was like, I guess he's picking up on some of this too.
By osmosis.
Yes.
So I mentioned it the last time, and I want to mention again that in late spring, early summer, we're going to be doing a program. So what we're talking about in these podcasts leading up to that is this program is going to talk not only about some of the limiting beliefs and so on, but how we got there. So you talked about the pleaser and so on. And so if our listeners want to continue to build on those skills, then they will be having an opportunity maybe to do a deep dive on those topics online.
Sounds good. I'll tell you, every little bit that we learn about ourselves can make our life just a little bit easier. And sometimes, it's been difficult facing those things. And like I said, when I took this quiz the other day or questionnaire, I sort of knew how it was going to come out, but didn't see it as impactful as it was. And it was like, it's nice to please people, but you can't please everybody all the time. So
it comes at a cost. Yeah. Yep. And all this stuff can be percolating in the background. And then suddenly you have a little chemical reaction that just shifts the whole thing, which is the fun part.
Wow.
So enjoy your chair.
Well, thank you very much. I am enjoying it, and I'm enjoying looking out at the sunlight on the snow. And I'm counting the weeks till spring. So,
And it's getting lighter earlier.
you know, that's interesting because, and I think I mentioned this once before. And so for anybody out there who doesn't like winter as much as I do and the time change, I made it a conservative effort to understand that December 21st was going to be the shortest day of daylight. And after that, the days were going to get longer. And I've been able to get through this winter much easier because of that. Because now, I look, 5 minutes, more of daylight
It's
today.
closer to the days getting longer, right?
Yep.
As we approach the 21st.
Yep, exactly. And so, on a day like today, the sun is shining. So obviously we'll probably see more light than if we're cloudy, but I just keep looking at it, and then I go and I count the days, and it's like, okay, this works for me. So we're getting there, even though we have a foot of snow on the ground.
Exactly. Just adding to our water table, which is what we need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you have a great day, and we are looking forward to some new things from the Intentionality Gurus. And again, if you're listening to the show, please feel free to contact us. And, if you want to be part of a show, we'd love to have you here, because sometimes I get tired of hearing my own voice. So.
All right. Sounds
Okay.
good. Thank
Have
you,
a great
Kim.
day, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye now.